before any business can go to market and actually start selling, they have to really understand, okay, who's our best audience? Who are we actually selling to? What's the problem that we're solving for them? What's their specific project that they're working on that we can help them with? All of that stuff.
Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander.
So today on the show, I'm very excited to welcome Garrett Jestice. So Garrett is a former CMO and founder of Prelude. He helps B2B agencies build consistent, repeatable growth. We're always looking to do that here. As a go-to market advisor, he works directly with founders to replace random tactics with a focused GTM system built on customer proof. And we're going to talk about GTM and how it is a new abbreviation and yet another abbreviation that we need to learn. And Garrett, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire to figure out why we need that phrase GTM. Anyway, I digress. The process clarifies audience, offers, messaging, and channels, then turns that strategy into practical sales and marketing execution that improves win rates and shortens sales cycles. Garrett, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Great to be on the show.
Likewise, man. So I'd love to learn about how did you get here? How did you get to helping with this new thing, GTM, that we hear so much about?
Yeah. So my background, like you mentioned, is in early stage startups. I mostly have worked in B2B software companies for the last, decade plus. About 3 years ago, I kind of fell into this consulting thing. So it was never really on my radar. I left my last gig as, a CMO of an early stage startup, was kind of looking for the next thing, felt a little burnout on just like the startup grind, and ended up falling into consulting. And I've been doing it for almost 3 years now, and I've loved it. And I've been able to work with a mix of software companies as well as a lot of agencies who have really similar challenges. By the time they get to about that $1 million in annual revenue, you're wanting to put more fuel on the fire and really start growing and ramping up, but a lot of times don't really know how to do that. And so that's where I focus. I come in and help them figure out, okay, how do we best go about this?
Yeah, I'd love to dig deeper into that. What makes the challenges similar and what makes them different in your experience?
Yeah, it's I think there's a couple of things. I think inherently it's the same problem to solve across software, services, doesn't matter, right? It is, how do we get more of our best fit clients or customers, right? And so if you're to that stage where you're, close to $1 million or so in revenue, then you have actually sold. You have customers, you have clients who are hopefully successful and happy. And I think where a lot of early stage companies get tripped up is trying to go too broad and do too much. And so that's really what my focus is. And again, it's applicable regardless of whether you're selling software or services. It's helping them identify the best customer or best client that they want to replicate over and over and over. They want to go find more just like that, and then helping them figure out a plan to go do that.
That makes sense. Can you talk about that starting place? And maybe not starting from somebody that just whipped up a business yesterday, but like the agency that's been around for a few years that's good at something and might have a few different verticals they're working with and different services, and they're a little bit lost in what help. Like, what's day one look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think usually we start by doing an audit. And so what that consists of is I take a deep dive look at all of the things that they're doing. Who are their best customers, looking at some of their data, looking at their offers, looking at their messaging across their website, across, sales pitch, looking at what channels they're active in. I also have kind of an assessment that I give to them that helps them kind of identify where they perceive to be the weakest parts of, their growth engine across marketing and sales. And then we come together and we put together a plan for where to focus together to improve those weakest points. And so usually it comes down to 4 core foundations, right? And so before any business can go to market and actually start selling, they have to really understand, okay, who's our best audience? Who are we actually selling to? What's the problem that we're solving for them? What's their specific project that they're working on that we can help them with? All of that stuff. The second is, what's our offer, right? That includes the service, the pricing, the packaging, all of that coming together. The third is messaging. So how do we communicate our unique value to them in a way that they care about? And then the fourth is channels. So where do we find them? Where do we reach them? And I think that what I've seen a lot is companies jump straight to that fourth one. They jump straight to channels. They hire an agency or a freelancer or a full-time marketing or salesperson to get leads, which is not bad. That's what you have to do. But if you're not tight and consistent on those first three before you jump to channels, it doesn't go as well as you want it to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's kind of dig into market a little bit. So I'm trying to think of a good example, but there's a lot of hand-wringing and indecision about all the variables that we have, right? So you have the agency that has 5 different verticals and they have 6 different services, but they have one service that they do really well. And then they decide, hey, we want to be the internal communications agency for upmarket for blue chip tech companies, right? And then you find that, okay, there's I'm making this up. There's 300 companies and 1,000 people, let's say, that are in our total addressable market. Are you off to the races? Do you say, hey, that market's too small, we need to expand it? Like, is there napkin math to figure out if you're on the right track? Like, how do you figure out market?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And again, it comes back to what are your goals for your business? So if you're starting an agency, a lot of times that's where we start in the beginning too, is what are your goals? What do you want to grow this into? Do you want this to be something small that you can continue to manage? Or do you want, global domination scale, right? Like, what is it that we're going for in the next 1 to 3 years? And so that can really help determine the market. I do think every business goes through kind of 3 core stages. Stage 1 I talk about is really about learning. So when most companies start, they have a mix of audiences and offers that they're just testing out, right? They have different services. They're trying to sell to this segment or this segment, but eventually you get to a point where you want to scale. And the fastest scale of revenue comes through repeatability. And so that stage 2 is really about focus. So you pick the one best audience segment and the one best offer to focus on, and you focus on repeating that over and over and over. Phase 3, or stage 3, is about expansion. And so typically you expand by selling the same offer or service to a new audience. Sometimes you can introduce a new service to sell to the same audience, right? It's horizontal versus vertical expansion. And so oftentimes it comes back to, going back to your question, is what are your goals for the next little bit? And is the market segment that we're going after big enough to sustain for the next 12 to 18 months? Is it a space where we can really win and own the next 12 to 18 months? Because you can always get to that phase 3 and expand into other segments or other services that you sell. And so usually I think companies stress too much about the size of the market in the early days. What it really comes down to is, have we proven we can actually sell to this segment? Do we have proof of happy clients that we can replicate? And is it sustainable for us to focus on this for the next 12 to 18 months? Can we really gain enough traction here to meet our goals? If so, then it's usually, let's move forward with it.
Okay. I think that makes sense. So we're starting with market. We're starting with one segment we can do well in, and then expanding out from there when we're ready. Getting to 2, which is offer. I think offers can be really strong and powerful. The objection might be from the agency that is working with bigger companies. Everything they've done has been at least relatively custom, even if they're getting less custom over time and getting more refined. But the objection they might have is like, I don't think that we can come up with an offer that's going to work for the Fortune 500 company. And I use that, as like an exaggeration. Maybe it's not a Fortune 500, but a bigger company, let's say. So can you talk about that a little bit? For the agency that has that objection, is offer the right way to think about it? Like how specific or productized are they getting for that kind of like customized upmarket-ish agency?
Yeah, it's, again, a really good question. I do think that, in my personal opinion, I think it's extremely rare for any type of company to do really effective marketing and sales and to grow significantly, quickly, and expand rapidly without having some level of productized product or service. When you are doing everything custom, it is extremely hard to scale, because because really scaling is about repeatability, right? Like I mentioned a minute ago, it's about finding where you win and repeating that same win over and over and over. If you have a different type of win here because you have a different type of service or a different type of company, it's going to be extremely hard to start scaling, especially when it goes beyond the founder, right? When you start bringing in employees to help you with marketing, with sales, they're going to be lost. They're going to be spinning their wheels knowing, well, where do we focus, right? They're going to be trying everything. And so again, it comes back to some of those goals. I do think you can grow a successful company that's focused on custom services, but it's not going to be huge and it's not going to grow as rapidly as you might want. And so if that aligns with your goals, I think that that's fine. If not, then that's when we have to get to a place where we can focus a little bit more, productize, put together those clear offers that are clear to sell.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with that in mind, like, are there any examples that you can share of that upmarket agency that used to be customized that's kind of like honed in on these offers for a particular segment?
Yeah, you bet. So I am still working with a company called Northbuilt. They are a custom development agency in Minneapolis. And, when I started working with them, they did a little bit of everything. Any custom dev, you need an app, we'll do that for you. You need integration, we'll do that for you. You need custom software, we'll do that for you. And they had sold lots of different things to lots of different audiences. And one of the things we worked on together is defining their best audience and their best offer. And what it really came down to is they focused on companies that build and manage their own software, especially in like the industrial services space, agriculture space. And so they had some good examples of customers who were in those spaces that really enjoyed working with them. And one of the things they noticed is most custom dev shops wanted to come in and build a big project. We'll build this big, huge software for you. It's this $100,000 plus project, pass it off to you and then move on. And what they found is the best clients that they had were the ones that they were doing simple ongoing maintenance. And so we actually redesigned everything to focus on pitching and leading with a maintenance and support offer. A lot of these companies don't have big internal, software development teams. They might have one or two people, and they might have some legacy software or some custom software that was built internally that no one's managing. And what they found is that that's the problem that they wanted to address and solve. So they are leading with that message and focusing on a support and maintenance offer, even though behind the scenes they can upsell and they're doing some new services, new offers. They're leading with that going to market. And it makes it a lot clearer to everyone who comes to their site that what value they offer.
I'm with you. I'm going to keep giving you objections because various agencies live inside of my brain. So I don't know what Northbuilt said, but let's say the hypothetical agency, you're like, hey, let's focus on agriculture. And they say, got it. But what happens if a swarm of locusts comes along tomorrow and kills all the agricultural companies? Shouldn't we have another niche to focus on? What do you say to that sort of market risk?
Yeah, so I think that it's valid, right? But I also think it comes back to like the repeatability piece, right? You have to balance the potential risk with how quickly we want to grow and how efficient we're going to be with our marketing and sales. So I believe that every unique audience and offer combo has to have its own go-to-market strategy, right? What that means is if those people in that audience, let's take two different audiences, two different segments, right? If they don't shop for the same solution in the same channels, in the same way, then there's no way to market to both of them effectively without having separate go-to-market strategies or plans, right? And so every new segment, offer, combo that you go after, that you launch, needs its own plan. And if you don't have the resources to sustain that in the early days, that's the challenge that a lot of companies get into, is you can go after multiple segments. Do you have the resources to sustain that? Because it's two different plans that you're going after, right? You need different messaging, you need different channels, you need potentially different offers. And so that's really like that phase 3 I was talking about before. That's that expansion phase. If you don't have the resources to do that today, then you're better off focusing on one segment and expanding later on, even though there's potentially some market risk there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And regardless, you're taking on risk, whether you know it or not, right? By not being by not doing that thing, you're also taking a risk. So that's a great point. Okay, so I'm this agency. I've gotten my act together. I've decided on market. I've got an offer that I want to test. And then now I'm going to start crafting messaging. What am I going to get wrong if I just do what most people do?
So I think most people try to start from scratch. They try to say, what's the ideal industry that we should go after? What's the ideal offer brand new that we should create? In the early days, when you're just starting and haven't sold anything, you have to start somewhere. So you have to do something like that. But most of those agencies or companies that have been around for a little while, they actually have the data. They have the proof with their existing customers. And so where I start is, let's go back and identify who is your best fit customer or client today. Who is getting the most value out of what you currently provide, right? And what is it that they value? And so really it's about understanding that journey of your best fit client and reverse engineering their success. That's how you get really good messaging. That's how you know which channels to focus on. And so to answer your question directly, I think it's jumping to the end or trying to create something from scratch instead of looking backwards and saying, where have we already proven that we have success that we want to replicate going forward?
Yeah, and I'll just say, like, as a tactic, AI has become a game changer here. And if you're not already, like if you're loading a Fathom or whatever into a chat GPT for your last 5 sales calls, your last 5 client calls, you can build all of your materials and your ads around that. Like,
Absolutely.
like literally putting everything in your client's words, and it's never been easier. But that brings us to a problem, which is when everybody's messaging is getting better and more well-timed and more ubiquitous, everything gets harder as well, right? And we have to get to the next level, which brings us to channels. So kind of the same question. What are the mistakes people make around channels once they have messaging dialed in, and how can we do better?
The biggest mistake that I see is people jump straight to channels without doing those first 3 things, right? So like as an example, I've worked with an agency before who came to me and said, we just wasted $100,000 over the last 6 months hiring 8 different marketing agencies and freelancers, and we have nothing to show for it, right? And when we really dug into it, it was because they jumped straight into channel execution without clarifying who's the right audience, what's the right offer, what's the right messaging, and understanding that piece. So that's the biggest one. I'd say the second, though, is if you have those first few foundations really locked up, the second one is going too broad. And so again, it comes back to resources. Most companies in those early stages don't have the resources to clearly win in 10 different channels. And so what you really need to do is understand, where are the biggest watering holes that I can tap into where my existing clients already hang out? And let's go win at 1 or 2 channels. Let's focus on 1 or 2 similar motions, win there, and before we expand. So that they expand too quickly to too many channels. And so you don't have to be on every social channel. You don't have to have a newsletter. You don't have to have a podcast. You don't have to go to this event or that event. You really need to figure out which one of these, would we prioritize if we could only pick one, and focus on winning there.
Yeah, to kind of like compare notes a little bit, it's amazing how idiosyncratic these different groups of buyers can be in terms of like how they behave, how they buy, how they consume information. The other day, like last week, I was on a call with an agency going after C-level marketers in the pharma industry, and we were just like dugging into connections, because we're starting with what we call referral engine. We're getting intros for people, making that sort of thing more systematic, and we just found that at that level, very few are connected to anybody that the agency already knows. And that's not because the agency isn't connected at all. It's because they're just not active on LinkedIn, and they're typically going to get business through these very close networks, right? Because it's very like rarefied. And you compare that to something like an e-commerce marketer at a growth stage e-commerce brand, and they're everywhere. They're on LinkedIn, they're engaging in content, they're showing up on interviews and doing all this stuff. They'll talk to you, so it's like just completely different things depending on where you're starting. So
just to double down on that going back to like what we were talking about before, that's the perfect example of why it's difficult to go after 2 different segments. Like, imagine for a second, I know those are pretty extreme examples, but imagine you were the same company trying to sell to e-commerce and pharma, just like you mentioned, right? They they, occupy very different places, very different channels, very different messaging. And so again, you need a custom plan for each of those segments. And that's why it gets challenging if you have very limited resources in the early days, right?
Yeah, and I can see like one challenging thing happening where you get to channel and then you're like, hey, here are the whatever, 1, 2, 3 things that are going to work really well. And maybe all of them, probably not all of them, but maybe a couple of them are things that just like do not fit the personality or the motivations of the owners or biz desk people, the 1 or 2 people that are involved in this. How do you handle that?
So a lot of times I like to talk about motions. So there are essentially 6 go-to-market motions. And the way I define that is really it's a grouping of similar types of channels that have similar types of execution. So for example, inbound, right? You're creating content, blasting it out there, and hopefully pulling in people that then convert, right? Outbound, where you're reaching out directly to people, partners, right? Or ecosystem led. That could be partners or other, communities that you tap into and leverage some of their existing connections, right? In the events is another motion. And so one of the things I like to do is start by identifying what are the strengths across the team, whoever is running marketing and sales for you, and how does that apply to the motions that we pick? Let's pick 1 or 2 motions and identify then the channels, specific channels within those motions that we can focus on going forward, because then that lends to the strengths there as well. The truth is every motion is effective. It's been effective for some company, right? It's really about identifying where do our clients live and what are we best at, and focus on doing that better than most of the other companies out there. So
yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of the times, like what I sort of tend to see is that there are emotions that get built up a lot that are very ubiquitous and sort of like well publicized. Maybe that's, and I think sometimes that's because there's somebody that can monetize that expertise a lot more easily than other motions, right? So like I'm not knocking any one of them. I think they all can work. But maybe that's the mass cold email thing. Maybe it's ads. Maybe it's whatever else. So I find that the thing that often works for agencies like going more upmarket, which is like our core audience, is like the stuff that's already kind of worked for them, but just done more systematically, like referrals, ecosystems, that kind of thing.
absolutely.
So I'd love to hear your perspective on that. Like, do you ever run into situations where there's something that's just not as sexy, but is going to work better for your clients? And if that sounds familiar, I'd love to hear examples.
Yeah, honestly, I think the type of stuff that you're doing, Dan, like the work that you're doing, like the whole referral engine thing, when companies are just getting started with marketing and sales, that's the type of stuff that I honestly recommend, because it always works to understand who you're already connected with, to tap into their existing trust, right? And connect with the people that they're already connected with. Warm intros like that always work. And so a lot of times companies just don't want to do that stuff. It takes a lot of work to reach out or pitch this person or reconnect. Like it takes time to do that stuff, right? And so sometimes it's just the discipline to focus on the things you probably should be doing but aren't prioritizing, like some of that stuff. So I think that's one of the classic examples is just outbound or more systematic referrals through who you know. If you're disciplined, like as an example, I'll give you one quick example. I'm working with a client now, founder who's kind of leading marketing and sales, and we were talking through different options for channels, and we got to a point a couple weeks ago where I just said, you need to book 30 minutes every morning before you start anything else. Go on LinkedIn and send this short message to the people who fit your audience and the people who who are connected to those people, the whole referral engine thing, right? Spend 30 minutes, do it every morning for the next few weeks, and let's see how it goes. And I mean, he's been messaging me in Slack every morning this week, like, hey, I got another one. Like, hey, we just closed this deal. And sometimes it's just about consistency there, right?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. The way that it's funny because I do the same process for myself, and I've actually found it to be like weirdly time saving and kind of relaxing because it's like it's high touch, high leverage. So it's not a situation like what I remember being really time consuming was the numbers game direct outreach thing where you're like, hey, I need to call this many people or email that many people to get this and I have to chase this person to get that, versus like getting on, reconnecting with like one or two people a week and getting like 3 intros from it each. Like that's a lot less work. Because a lot of it's just kind of working backwards and you're like, hey, I need to have 20 calls this month to get to this many proposals, to get to this many sales. It's like, however those calls happen is less, it's not immaterial, but it's less material to just making them happen, so.
And
that's
and
what
sometimes we spend so long thinking about how should we do this and should we do this channel? Should we do this channel? Should we layer this thing on? Should we tweak this thing? And sometimes it comes down to, no, you just need to message those people who can refer you to the right people, those 3 people who who already have those connections. And so we overcomplicate it sometimes when you can just keep it a little bit simpler, but focus on consistency, right?
Yeah, and the thing that I also love about referrals is like they work for everybody universally. Like there's nobody that's going to be less affected by that transfer of trust. But that's not the same thing with other channels. Like there's some people that will only hire through referrals, right? And they won't find anybody through content or ads or whatever. So I think that's good to point out. Let's talk about GTM a little bit, just out of like personal curiosity. Like, what is GTM? Why do we need it? How did it come about?
Yeah. So I do think that GTM, go to market, is something that we've seen a lot more the last few years. It's probably stemmed out of the software space, right? It's some of those buzzwords in the software space today. And what I think it really stems out of is go to market is really a collective strategy and motion across your entire team. So one of the things I've seen in the past is companies, as they start to grow, not even that big, but as they get to the million or so beyond, they start to really segment internally. They have the sales team focused on this thing. They have the marketing team focused on this thing, the delivery or support team focused on this thing, right? And I think that we want to work together, but we have seen ourselves as separate teams often in the past. I think this whole go-to-market GTM thing is really a push to kind of get back to the roots of, you know what, we're all one team. We might have different skill sets and disciplines, but at the end of the day, go-to-market is how do we find and win and be successful with those best fit clients or customers that we serve, right? It's about generating revenue for your business and helping clients be successful. And that takes multiple disciplines across your company, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'll kind of buy into it on that level, in that like a lot of the best software companies now have Slack channels. They have these kind of ecosystems where things are more tied together. Like if I use Clay, and Clay has like a really vibrant, Slack channel, and it's like, oh, it's almost becoming it's something like a requirement that you have something like that, I think, as opposed to just these like siloed tools that don't have any sort of like movement attached to them at all. I guess my question is like, have you seen, it doesn't have to be that, but is there anything interesting like that you've seen agencies do that kind of bring the team or, other sectors into the sales process?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have anything specific off the top of my head, but I do think that, again, I'm biased in this, but when you can really get close alignment across all of those teams on those core foundations that we've talked about today, who's our best audience and why, right? Which of our customer or client case studies do we want to replicate going forward? What's our right offer? How do we communicate our value? And is it consistent across the sales pitch and the website or marketing channels? Which channels are we focused on and why? I think that is the foundation of all of it. If everyone's on the same page about that stuff, it can help so much. I've worked personally in small startups in the past where the sales team is kind of doing their own thing. They're their own audience. They're kind of tweaking their own offers, their own channels. The marketing team's doing their own thing. The product team or support team is doing their own thing. And if you can get everyone on the same page and really honestly get everyone bought into those core foundations, that's the thing that goes further than so much more.
Yeah, and one thing that I think software gets really right is there's much more of this kind of marketing dynamic of building in public, and I think that comes from like, hey, here's the stuff we're working on, here's when the features are going to come out. Like they're already kind of doing that anyway, that they're really good at it. I think the other motivation is that like their revenue is more spread out. So like if somebody has an issue with a feature and they lose that customer, it's not as big of a deal as if an agency like loses a client. So because of the risk aversion, I think agencies are a little bit more scared about like building in public and talking about what's worked and what hasn't, when in reality, like that's really great kind of trust building marketing content.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear your perspective on that. Like, are there examples of agencies that have opened up more, like in terms of messaging? What have you seen work for that agency that's like willing to share a little bit more?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think what it comes back to is you asked me at the beginning of this call is what are some of the main differences between software and services? One of the big ones that I've seen is what is your client trusting, right? And so when you are selling a software product, right, primarily they're trying to understand, do I trust that this product is going to solve my problem, right, that I need help fixing? When you are hiring an agency or a service provider, really what it comes down to is, do I trust that these people are going to help me solve my problem and get me the results that I need? And so I would say the trust piece is even more important with agencies. And to that point, I would say sharing kind of in public your process, the problems that you solve, some of the results that you're getting for different types of clients is more important for agencies than it is for software companies, right? Because that's one of the ways that people can learn to trust you, right? When they see your process, when they see the tweaks that you're making to your business, when they see the results that you're getting for clients, you're building trust with them, even though you haven't had that one-on-one conversation. And that's exactly what you need to be able to close a deal later on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Garrett, kind of getting towards the end of our time, what are you working on? What are you excited about over the next few months or a few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, this type of stuff I'm always working on, even for my own business. It's hard to do this core foundation stuff. One of the things that I'm working on right now is I'm actually launching a new offer for a new audience. And so I recently started a community, it's a Slack group right now for solo service providers. So fractionals or consultants, independent consultants, right? And one of the things I noticed is, there's some emerging groups out there, but not a ton. And there's just a lot of us solos like myself who are out there who are looking for ways to kind of connect with people who are on their same level, learn from them, strengthen and improve, grow their company. So if anyone's interested in that, I'd be happy to chat about it. Connect with me on LinkedIn or whatever else, and happy to get you involved. But that's one of the biggest things that I've been working on recently that has been very fun. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Awesome. We'll get that linked up, man. And hopefully we'll do a follow-up at some point. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.